Most followers of Gurdjieff will be familiar with the idea of many eyes. Gurdjieff said that we are legion, not just a single person within our heads or however we view ourselves. Now, this notion of many eyes is actually misleading. And in fact, we don't have many eyes, we have an infinite number of eyes. Because what we are at any one moment is totally determined, for the unconscious person anyway, is totally determined by our circumstances. There may be traits that we have, but every time we're in a different situation, those traits will manifest in a different way. So if you're a people-pleasing person, then yeah, sure, when you're with people you're going to be pleasing people, but in different circumstances you will do it in a different way, and if you wanted to, you could say that all of those different ways were different eyes. It doesn't really serve any useful purpose, because what it does is it sets up this idea that somehow these eyes have to be subjugated in some kind of way, which is not really what the work is about. In fact, the whole idea of subjugation is an idea of violence. And as Maurice Nichols said, the man who has made progress in the work is a man without violence. So how do you form a single I without engaging in violence towards what you perceive to be all the other eyes within you? Well, let's dismiss this idea of having many eyes, and let's talk about a different approach. There is having an infinite number of eyes is exactly the same as having no eye. It's the same thing. No one at home. So, you know, if we are in one circumstance, then we manifest in one way, another circumstance another way, and there are infinite ways that we manifest. Because there are infinite circumstances, and because there's no one at home, there is no I that is a people-pleasing I. There is just a conditioning, an emotional conditioning, and circumstances that trigger that conditioning. And there may be, in the same person, a resentful I. Again, it's not really an I. It's just some psychological conditioning and some circumstances that bring about that feeling of resentment. Now, I can go a bit further with this, because if we consider that there is no one at home, and that we are effectively automatons, that's a very good word to use, because it describes very well that we are automatic participators in the world in which we live in. So, you know, one set of circumstances we behave one way, another set of circumstances another way. There is no I in there. There are no I's that are doing anything. It's just our own psychological state plus circumstances, and then we behave in a certain way. Very closely linked to the idea of not having free will, because, you know, it's at least implied a little bit that a person who has many eyes, each eye can manifest in a particular way as it wants to, as it is required to, but that's not the case. There just is no free will. There is a response to a stimulus, and this constant chain of those kind of reactions taking place all day, every day. Now, the creation of permanent I does not involve somehow subjugating these things, or trying to build another I. You cannot build a permanent I. A permanent I comes about through two things. One is understanding, and understanding is just given such a poor rap. Everybody wants the esoteric stuff, permanent I, master, enlightenment, cosmic consciousness, objective reason. Bullshit. What you need first and foremost, as is stated in Proverbs in the Bible, is understanding. So you need to understand at every moment, well, at every moment that you're able to observe anyway, what is going on within you. All these separate I's are just manifestations of your animal, your survival instinct. I've said in other videos that when our survival is more assured, we feel positive emotions, traditionally called positive emotions anyway, pleasure. When our survival is more threatened, then we feel what are called negative emotions, or anger, or fear, or hatred, or derision. As many forms of negative feeling as you can imagine in actual fact. These things are like clockwork. You just literally just have to watch them and understand them. And then slowly but surely you will develop a permanent I, described to me as the I of understanding. This I is not in any kind of conflict with what is going on within you, because what is going on within you is just according to law. Because we're human beings, we do not escape the law of our existence as human beings. What we can do is we can establish, as was explained to me, I don't know how useful this will be for people, but we become the eye of the storm. The storm is still raging, but at the eye of the storm it is calm, and we're able to look out on all the phenomena taking place, and look at them with a fairly equitable view. So a circumstance where normally you might get angry, you might still get angry, but if you understand how anger is generated and why you are angry, this understanding diminishes that kind of reaction. And similarly, getting overexcited about some favourable event, it's just as detracting as becoming angry at some kind of event. So this I, this permanent I, is not at all the same thing as all the other I's, the infinity of them, that can manifest because of our animal nature. It's very hard to explain, and possibly that's the best I can do. It's difficult to explain because it takes years of work to come to this kind of understanding. And as I've mentioned in at least one other video, many of Gurdjieff's students had nervous breakdowns, some suffered from insanity, some became ill, because his methods were quite violent in many ways. And as I've also mentioned, I was told by at least one person who knew him that it was not wise to follow everything he said, because he wasn't always right. He was a human being, so he's bound to be mistaken in some circumstances. So when we see, as I have recently seen, videos just parroting what they've taken from Beelzebub's Tales or from In Search of the Miraculous, and laying it out as though they're some kind of experts, it sends shudders down my backbone, because as Gurdjieff's work becomes better known, so will the misplaced ideas about what it is and how you do it. As a guiding light in all of this, please remember that non-violence towards yourself is the most important form of non-violence. So when you see yourself behaving in a certain way, then you need to understand it. And I can't tell you in a short video how you do that. But that's the way to do it. Understanding is a non-violent thing. We're not setting one part of ourselves against another part. And yes, I know Mr. Gurdjieff talked about the struggle between yes and no. But in other places he also talked about how the struggle between yes and no can drain a man's energy. And then he starts talking about the third force, and then we're off with the fairies. And people get lost. It's actually very simple. Understand your nature. Understand why you behave as you do in various situations. An infinity of situations. You don't have, 20 eyes, you have an infinite number of them. And then when you understand that, you can start to objectively look at what is happening and why it is happening, and that creates within you an eye which essentially looks on what is going on within you with some level of impartiality, and actually to some extent couldn't care less. It's not the message a lot of Gurdjieff type people want to hear there. They're attracted by the idea of strange, violent ways that achieve some extraordinary result. But it really isn't like that. I don't think there's any more I can say about it in this video.